You know how people say life changes in a moment? Mine did. Not in a slow, cinematic kind of way, but with one question from a complete stranger that shattered everything I thought I knew. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. It was one of those humid, post-storm afternoons in southern Florida. The kind where your shirt clings to your back and the air smells like soaked asphalt and faint smoke from relief tents cooking lunch for the displaced. I was wearing donated jeans 2 sizes too big and a volunteer shirt with a faded logo. Nothing special. Just a girl stacking cans and handing out water bottles to people who had lost their homes. Then, I saw him. A tall man, maybe in his 60s, walked straight toward me like the crowd didn't even exist. Polished shoes, tailored suit, silver cufflinks. He looked like he'd stepped out of a Wall Street boardroom and accidentally wandered into a disaster zone. He stopped a few feet away and just stared at me. I was about to ask if he needed help, when his voice, low, shaky, cut through the noise. "Have you ever received any money from your grandfather?" I blinked. What?" He repeated it, slower this time. "Has your grandfather ever sent you money?" I felt the heat drain from my body, but not because of the sun. "No," I said, suddenly unsure of my own memories. I never knew my grandfather. I was raised by my dad's second wife after he died. She always said he wanted nothing to do with me. The man's face paled. It was like he'd just heard someone died. He didn't say anything else. Just looked at me with these tired, broken eyes and whispered, "I need to show you something." And that's when the ground beneath my entire life cracked wide open. Because what he showed me, what he came all the way from New York to confirm, was that someone had taken something meant for me. And not just something. $3 million. Hey, have you ever felt like someone kept a secret from you your whole life? Let me know in the comments if you've ever been lied to by family. It's heavier than it sounds, isn't it? But before I tell you how I uncovered the truth and who betrayed me, I need to take you back to the man in the suit and the phone call that changed his life forever. Long before he showed up at the shelter, before his eyes met mine across a sea of tents and folding tables, he had already seen my face. My name isn't Kinley anymore. It's Sienna Drew, and I didn't even know the storm had already hit someone else's life before it ever reached mine. That man in the suit? His name is Reynard Drew, my grandfather. He was sitting alone in his Manhattan office when he got the call that led him to me. The city's skyline glimmered behind him, but his eyes were on a plain manila envelope. Inside were photos of me, tired, sweaty, helping an elderly woman lift a box of diapers. There were no designer clothes, no car keys dangling from my jeans. Just secondhand shoes and a stubborn kind of smile that barely reached my eyes. He hadn't seen me since I was a baby. But he had been sending something my way every month for 19 years. $10,000. Deposited. Every single month. $3 million in a trust.
In my name.
And not 1 cent had ever reached me. The legal guardian I had grown up with, Marla, always said that Reynard cut ties after my mom passed. I used to imagine him as this bitter, cold man who never wanted to know me. But that day, he realized something was deeply wrong. He hired a private investigator and got every document he'd never bothered to look at before. The trust was supposed to cover everything: school, healthcare, a decent life. But I had nothing, not even a college application. I was 19 and sleeping on a cot in a gymnasium. No one was stealing from me, right?
Wrong.
Quick pause. If you're still here, hit that like button. And tell me this. What would you do if you found out someone close to you had taken money that was meant for you? That's what Reynard was asking himself as he boarded a last-minute flight to Miami, holding proof that something wasn't adding up. He didn't come to accuse me. He came to meet me, the granddaughter he never got to raise, the girl he thought had been safe all these years. But when he found me handing out food in a borrowed t-shirt, something inside him broke. He approached me gently, like he was afraid I'd vanish.
"Sienna," he said.
"I'm your grandfather." I laughed at first. A short, dry laugh that didn't reach my chest. "No, you're not. My grandfather wanted nothing to do with me." Then he pulled out a photo. It was my mom, 17, standing on a beach, grinning, with a little heart-shaped birthmark on her wrist. "You have the same one," he said. I didn't want to look, but I did. I turned my wrist, and there it was. The same mark. My breath caught. Because in that second, my whole life rewrote itself. That night, I agreed to meet him again. Just for an hour. Just to hear him out. I had no idea that hour would open doors I thought were locked forever. Want to know what he told me at dinner? You're not ready for it. I didn't dress up for the dinner. Didn't see the point. I pulled on clean jeans, a plain blouse from the donation pile, tied my curls back, and caught the bus. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. Least of all a man I'd just met who claimed to be family. But when I walked into that quiet seafood restaurant on the edge of the hotel strip, he was already there, seated near the window. The ocean shimmered behind him like something out of a postcard. And for a moment, I didn't know whether to walk toward him or away. He stood when he saw me. "Thank you for coming, Sienna." I gave him a tight nod. I almost didn't. We ordered light, salad for me, grilled fish for him, but barely touched our plates. He didn't waste time. He reached into his bag and pulled out a folder.
Slim. Neat.
Like he was trying not to scare me. "This," he said, sliding it across the table, "is the trust. It was opened after your mother passed. $10,000 a month. Every single month." I stared at the printout. Rows and rows of bank transfers. It didn't feel real. I touched the page like it might disappear. "I never saw a cent," I whispered. Reynard nodded slowly. "I believe you." Then he added, "Your father's second wife, Marla, was given guardianship. She had legal access to the account. It was meant to be used for you. Education. Health. A future." That's when the shaking started in my hands. Because while I was working after school at the gas station and wearing shoes with soles so thin I could feel the pavement, someone else had been spending money meant for me. I tried to keep my voice level. "So, what now?" He looked down at his plate, untouched. "Now, we find out where it went. And we get it back. If someone had used your future to build their own comfort, what would you do? Comment below." I read every word. "You're not shouting into the void here." He pulled out his phone and called a lawyer, someone named Miles, with the kind of crisp voice that said, "I've been in a courtroom before breakfast." "I need a full audit," Reynard said. "Last 5 years. Withdrawals, transfers. Prioritize anything large."
He looked at me then.
I didn't say a word. I just nodded. The rest of dinner was quieter. He told me stories about my mom, Lena. How she used to sit on the roof as a teenager and sketch the clouds. How she turned down medical school because she wanted to teach. How stubborn she was. How kind. I listened like I was hearing my mother's voice through his memories. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something strange in my chest. Something like being seen. But just when I thought the worst had already happened, the audit came back. And what it revealed, it changed everything. The report landed faster than I expected. Less than a week after that dinner, I met Reynard at a quiet cafe near the shelter. His hands trembled slightly as he passed me the folder, thicker this time. He didn't speak at first. So I opened it. Private school tuition payments in someone else's name. Luxury car leases. Home renovations. Dance competitions. International trips. Receipts. Invoices. Withdrawals. All from a trust fund meant for me, and not a single line with my name on it. But Marla's? Her daughters? Everywhere. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I thought things were just tight, that I had to work harder because we didn't have enough. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. We both knew now, this wasn't a mistake.
It was a choice.
100 choices. Made over years. And it was time to confront it. We drove in silence to the house I hadn't been inside in almost 4 months. The neighborhood was still gated, still perfect. The palm trees looked too well-watered for people who claimed insurance hadn't come through. Marla opened the door like nothing had changed. "Sienna," she said, voice syrupy. "You're back." Behind her, her daughter Camille came down the stairs in yoga pants and a brand new phone glued to her hand. She grinned like this was a holiday reunion. Reynard stood beside me, face unreadable. We stepped inside. She served coffee, made small talk. But when Reynard placed that thick folder on the glass table, the air shifted. I've reviewed the trust fund activity, he said.
Calm.
Controlled. And we have some questions. Her smile froze. Those are normal household expenses, Marla replied lightly. Raising 2 girls isn't cheap. Everything benefited Sienna, too. Camille chimed in, bubbly. And Aruba last spring was totally needed. We were all stressed from the storm. I flinched. I'd slept on a cot during that storm. With strangers. With children who lost their toys and grandmothers who couldn't sleep through the thunder. I'd cried silently into a borrowed pillow while they were on a beach. Marla flipped through the pages, still pretending nothing was wrong. Home repairs. School fees. Shared benefits. Reynard looked straight at her. Sienna went to public school. These invoices are for Camille's private academy. This car, he tapped the paper, is in your name. Her mask slipped for just a second. And then she said something I'll never forget. Why should one child get everything? You gave money for a family. I did what I had to. Let that sit for a second. What would you say if someone told you they deserved your inheritance more than you? Drop a comment below. I'm still catching my breath. Reynard stood slowly. You didn't raise a family. You redirected a future. One that belonged to Sienna. Our lawyer, Miles, stepped out and made a quiet call. Minutes later, officers were at the door. Marla's voice rose in disbelief. You can't do this. In my own house. But they could. And they did. Camille's face crumpled as her mother was cuffed and led outside. Mom, she whispered. What's happening? I stood still. Hands clenched. Heart racing. But I didn't cry. Because I had already cried all those years. But that was only the beginning. Because taking her to court wasn't about revenge. It was about something deeper. Something harder. In part 5, I'll tell you what happened when I stood before a judge, and what came next that no one prepared me for. The courtroom was cold. Not just in temperature, but in atmosphere. Like every wall had absorbed the weight of too many broken families. I sat behind the prosecution table beside Reynard. He held a copy of the trust agreement in one hand, and in the other, he just held mine. Marla sat across from us. Perfect posture. Perfect blazer. No apologies. She never looked at me once. The prosecution laid it out clearly. Over $3 million deposited over 19 years for my education, my care, my future. All funneled into things I never touched. Vacations I never took. Schools I never attended. Clothes I never wore. The defense argued it was a shared household. That Sienna didn't complain. You want to scream in those moments. You want to say, I didn't complain because I thought I didn't matter. But instead, I stood. I testified. In a simple navy dress. Hair back. No makeup. Nothing to prove but the truth. I thought we were poor, I said. So I never asked for new shoes. I took the part-time jobs. I smiled through it. I paused. I never asked why Camille had ballet shoes with rhinestones while mine were from a thrift store. I glanced at Marla. I thought maybe love came with conditions. The room was still. Even the judge leaned slightly forward. Camille testified, too. And, to her credit, she cracked. She read aloud text messages she'd sent, bragging about purses, mocking my cheap wardrobe. I didn't think it was stealing, she said, voice shaking. I just thought it was normal. It wasn't. The jury returned a verdict in 3 days. Guilty on all counts. Marla was sentenced to 12 years. Full restitution. Everything seized. House, cars, luxury accounts.
Gone.
As we left the courtroom that day, cameras flashed. I kept my head down. I wasn't there to be a headline. I was there to reclaim something no amount of money could fix. My worth. Halfway down the courthouse steps, Reynard whispered, You did more than survive this. You rewrote your story. And he was right, because healing didn't come with the verdict. It came slowly, quietly, in therapy sessions where I said things out loud I'd buried for years. In choosing not to respond when Camille wrote me a letter filled with apologies and regret. In walking into Reynard's home in New York and asking to stay in the small guest room at first because space still scared me. In enrolling in a community college to study social work so I could help other young people who'd had their voices stolen. And one night, as I stood on the balcony overlooking Central Park, something inside me shifted. I whispered into the cool evening air. Money disappears. People lie. But no one gets to define my value again. Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. The trust fund was eventually rebuilt. But the real inheritance was knowing that survival isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of who you choose to become next. If this story touched you, share it. Someone else might need it. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me your story. And most of all, don't ever let anyone tell you that silence is strength. Sometimes strength is saying no more. Thank you for listening.